This podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not financial advice. Please consult professional help before making financial decisions.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Attitudes with Andy. Today, we're talking about finances. And if you're a young person, you're going to love this. We're going to leave this conversation with Mr. Algy Smith-Maxwell, who is an incredible investor and so knowledgeable. We're going to leave feeling very empowered and knowing the simple and easy steps we can do to create a wealthy life. I think right now there is a lot of fear mongering with finances, interest rates, and how young people are never going to be able to afford a home or to be able to retire. And so we talk all about that and we really debunk it. And yeah, I think you guys are going to love this episode. I forgot to say in the intro how much Algy loves his job and loves what he does. He adores what he does. He's generated a massive amount of wealth for not only himself, but also other people. And he doesn't need to be working for the financial reasons, but he keeps working because he absolutely loves what he does. And this is one of the key themes of the episode, but he also reassures us that, guys, it's okay if we don't know what we want to do. We're so young, there's plenty of time. So it is honestly such a reassuring and empowering conversation, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it because we are learning from one of the best of the best. I feel very honored that we got to have this conversation. He is very well known in the investing world, particularly in the British investing world. So without further ado, here is the episode of when I was in England and got to interview Mr. Algy Smith-Maxwell. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Attitudes with Andy. This is a place where we get to learn and grow on how to be our best selves from the amazing guests that we have on. Today, I'm actually in England. We're on tour. We love that. And we have an amazing guest on who I've been wanting to get on for a while. But before I tell you who that is, today we're going to be talking about finances, building wealth, and generating wealth, and also talking about the cost of living crisis right now and the fear mongering that's going on and how we can empower all of you guys who are young listeners to make smart money moves so we can all live a good life. So today,
quite a big subject.
Today we have the perfect person for that. He has been in the investing world for 30 years. He's currently working at Jupiter, which is an asset wealth management firm in London. You are the research director for funds.
Yes, absolutely. And I've been there since 2001, so over 20 years.
Yeah, but you started started your career in 1993.
Yes, long time ago.
That's all right, I stalked you. So, without further ado, please welcome Algy.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and a very happy Christmas to you.
Thank you. This will be post-Christmas, but we love that. And a happy new year. Okay, so today I would love to kind of start at the beginning. You have been very successful in your career, helping people make money, but also generating wealth yourself. But I would love to kind of start from the beginning and talk about how you personally built your wealth.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't look like it was going to be a very successful career for me, I suppose, when I started off in life, because like so many of us, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so for those of you who are in the audience who are listening, not sure what you want to do in life, don't panic. That's my first bit of advice. It takes a while to find your groove in life, to work out what really interests you. And of course you can't do that until you've tried a fair few things. And so I tried the army. I had 6 years in the British Army. I became a landscape gardener. I went to horticulture college and studied landscape contract management. And after a fairly short time, I realized that maybe the heavy lifting part of life wasn't for me, and putting down York stone paving wasn't my greatest skill at 4 o'clock on a wet Friday winter's afternoon. But I made some great friends. And then I thought I wanted to go into finance in some shape or form because I love talking to people.
You're very good at it.
Well, I love listening to people too. And I love listening to intelligent people. And I've always enjoyed helping people. But how on earth do you get into the industry when you haven't been to university and don't have a degree? And that, I think, is more relevant to today than it has been for the last 30 years, because now at long last, I think that society has realised that there are loads of very capable people who can do wondrous things in companies without having proven themselves to be academically intelligent by having gone to university. So for all those people who haven't been to uni, don't worry. It is not the end of the world. It is the beginning of something completely different.
I love that. That's very comforting to hear.
It's important.
Yeah, definitely. Because people always be like, you need to go to uni.
No, but you need to prove, do need to have proof that you are capable of being a great asset to a company. And there are a variety of different components, I think, to being helpful to people in a company. The first one is being a team player. Secondly is people enjoying your company. The third thing is being really hardworking. And for me, in my early days, that meant working weekends as well as weekdays. And then when you really get into your subject, then it's not work, it becomes play. It becomes your life. And if you can find that thing in life you really enjoy before you get into relationships that are long term, with it might involve bringing up children and things, then all the better, because you can really become very tunnel visioned, which I've always been accused by my darling wife of being. But that basically is, I think, one of the roots to success is getting your head down and being pretty focused.
So why did you think I like talking to people, so therefore finance? Because I wouldn't usually put the two together.
Well, what I realised was that I was never going to get a job working as a fund manager, having not got a degree in economics or any relevant training. But I've always loved selling. Even when I was a boy, I'd run across the back field to go and sell a couple of bags of cooking apples or plums or whatever was ever in the orchard at the time to someone who was picnicking just at the top of the lane, and they could never resist the answer of saying, yes, of course I'll buy them. And I used to sell horse manure at the end of the drive as well, and that used to be a real winner in the spring. So I loved the feeling of selling. But then I realised that when I thought of the idea of becoming a financial advisor, which is what I did, people needed educating, and it didn't matter how old they were, they needed help in ensuring their finances were understood and shored up for the future. And so that required conversations and going to go and see these complete strangers, and spending time getting to know each other, and then doing the fact-finding mission to find out what actually indeed they wanted, and then come back with some sensible suggestions as to what they should do planning for the future, became a lot of fun and very, very rewarding. And I'll never forget my first clients. I remember there's one wonderful chap who came from. He was born on the island of St Vincent, and I went to go and see him in Kensal Green, and we met up a few times, and he eventually decided to invest in what I recommended to invest in. I remember he put in £50,000 in 1992.
Wow.
Into these mutual funds, which in the UK we call unit trusts. And once we'd signed everything up and it was all sorted, he then said to me, "Will you try some of my homemade wines?" Well, 2 hours later, I was paralytic. I had to leave my car at Kensal Green and come and collect it the next day. But we were firm friends for years. And, that's £50,000. If it had just compounded at a return of 7% per annum since 1992, it would be worth well over £200,000 today.
Which is around 400,000 Australian dollars.
Yeah.
A
So,
lot of Aussie listeners.
that is the job. The job as a financial advisor for me, and now as a fund manager for me, is to make sure that people retain the purchasing power of their savings, and particularly your generation. If I can help educate them how to save when you're young, my goodness, it makes old age so much easier. It actually enables you to be able to afford to do the career you want to do, rather than just chasing money to be able to pay for life, because you've saved in the early years. And that is lesson number one: save in the early years.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love your passion.
Yeah.
This
Well,
is perfect.
actually, let me give you an example of this, just, just to sort of frame what I'm saying. So imagine you had a twin sister, okay, and from the age of 18 to 28, you decided you were going to save 1,000 Aussie dollars a year. How much is 1,000 Aussie dollars?
That's £500.
Okay, so call it 2,000 Aussie dollars
Okay.
a year, which is basically £1,000.
Which is very reasonable.
It's a very smart. So it's achievable. So in my currency, £1,000 a year from the age of 18 to 28. And if you were to put that into a fund, which is a portfolio of shares managed by somebody very sensible, but not high risk, and not reckless. And that was to generate an annualized return that averaged out at, say, 7% per annum. And at 28, you decided, I haven't got any money left. For whatever reason, I'm paying I'm getting a mortgage or whatever, and you stopped investing. But your twin sister didn't start saving that £1,000 or $2,000 a month, a year, until she was 28. If she saved £1,000 a year until the age of 65, again getting that return of 7% per annum, her savings would never be as great as yours.
Even if I stopped investing at 28.
If you stopped at 28, the year she started, and she carried on all the way to 65, your saving pot will be quite a bit bigger than hers. And the numbers are inaccurate here, but I'm going to say that your pot will be worth about £215,000, and hers would only be worth about £185,000. But
Wow.
caveat emptor, those numbers could be wrong.
Yeah.
But that is the early years are crucial to ensuring that you have savings when you get old.
Okay. So number one is always put savings away. But should we have an emergency fund before we start investing? That's what I always hear about. And I'm like, oh, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, well, of course, that is it's sensible to have an emergency fund, isn't it?
Yeah.
What you've got to think about is how long a period of time do you need to be able to have that raft of safety for? And the older you get, the longer you need that period of time to be. So maybe for you, being young and busy as you are, you might say 3 months is all I need is to have a safety fund. When you get to my age, and I'm knocking on to, I'm 57 now, I want to have a safety raft of a good year's income in an emergency fund, because when I get ill, I get really ill, and if I lose my job, then I'm not going to find a new job very quickly, and I've got responsibilities that are quite large with a young family. So everything changes, and adapt to those changes. But one of the things we haven't spoken about, of course, is compound interest, isn't it?
Yes.
And what does that mean? And the best way of explaining it is that, because I talked about 7% compound return per annum. And the best way of explaining that to someone who is not a natural mathematician is whatever the number is you're hoping to get as a return each year, if you divide that number into 72, that tells you how many years it takes to double the value of your investment. So, for example, if you've got an investment that returns on average 10% per annum, divide 10 into 72, it goes 7.2 times.
Mm-hmm.
That means it's going to take 7.2 years to double your money.
Okay.
That's all it means. But on the other hand, if you don't save and you keep the money in cash, assuming you're getting zero interest on your cash, and you say you had £1,000 in the bank, if inflation was at 5%, you divide 72 by 5, and you quickly work out that over 15 years or 14 years, you've halved the value of your cash. You can only buy half of the amount of goods that you could have bought 15 years ago with that cash, because inflation's eaten away at it. So you must invest in something which grows to protect yourself from inflation.
So when you say save, you mean actually invest your money, not just
Invest.
sit in a bank account
No.
and save
Absolutely crucial
to
that the
invest.
vast majority of your money is saved in something which is going to empower you against the ravages of inflation.
Okay.
Now, do you think that a house or a flat is an asset or a liability?
I personally think it's a liability in most cases.
Correct.
Thank you so much. But can we talk about that? Because so many people are like, I want to buy a house. And I'm like, they're so expensive to maintain.
They are, aren't they? And then you've got to insure them.
Yeah.
And then you have, then you've got all the wear and tear. Particularly where you live, the sun is so damaging, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then it's a bottomless pit looking after a property. Of course, we all have to have a roof over our heads. I would strongly urge your generation to invest the way I think people should invest, in terms of investing in profitable companies that have been around for a very long time through a mutual fund or a unit trust, and put their savings into that, and not chain themselves up with the responsibility and the liability of having to take out a mortgage. And
That takes like 30 years to pay
it
off.
does. And there's what I call good debt and bad debt. Good debt's when you borrow money off people,
Yeah.
maybe to inject into your business, knowing that the cost of borrowing might be 5 or 6%, or maybe 8 or 9%, but the return on the capital that you're investing in the business might be 20%. So you're generating a much greater return from your borrowings than it's costing you to borrow. That's a very profitable thing to do. But bad debt is when it just drains your resources, and that's what mortgages do. So yes, we all at some point want to have a roof over our heads, but don't think, for goodness sake, that getting on the housing ladder is the most important thing since what we call sliced bread. My wife and I didn't buy our first property until I was 33.
Okay. So you wait, because I think I hear a lot of parents saying to their kids like, "Oh, you got to get on the property ladder. You got to get on it now because it's only going to increase." And they kind of put this pressure. And then even within people my age, so I'm 24, like if somebody's buying a house, people are like, "Wow, they're so successful." But then if another person is just like investing lots, that's kind of really like overlooked and not glamorized.
Yes, and property. I mean, the Gold Coast in Australia. I mean, property
Yeah.
prices are absolutely astronomically high, aren't they?
They
And they
are.
probably always will be. Property prices can go both ways, and you're highly geared. If you've got $5,000 in a property that cost $100,000, say for example, say you've got $95,000 mortgage, and the property falls in value by 10%, then suddenly your equity of 5%'s been wiped out, and you are down to the tune of $10,000, because the property is worth much less. So I just think that mortgages are very dangerous things to take out until such time as you've got great financial stability.
And then it makes people, like if I got a mortgage now, it would make me feel like I have to stay in this city. I have to stay working this job I don't like because I need to pay the mortgage. Whereas like because I don't have that, I feel like I can just jet off anywhere and do anything. Like I'm a lot more agile.
And I think that freedom is so valuable. You know, in your 20s, you've got freedoms that you'll never have again in the same way. And just don't, yeah, don't have yourself, hamstrung by not having that freedom. And that freedom to travel, that freedom to try different things, find your passion, but do not get financially tied down.
Okay, so we want to have maybe 3 months of emergency or however much makes us feel good.
Yeah.
We want to start investing, even if it's a little bit, because we don't maybe have huge incomes right now. And maybe think about investing in shares or mutual funds instead of a house
Yes.
for now.
For me, and that is a very personal thing, I would invest in a portfolio of equities. You know, even if it's a passive index tracker in a sensible index.
Okay, wait, can we just speak? I get what you're saying. So, but can we just use simpler terms is what I'm trying to say.
I've gone jargon on you, haven't I? Sorry.
Everyone's like, what?
Yep. So there is an index called the MSCI World Index. It's an index of the world's biggest companies around the world. And before you've learnt to feel comfortable about investing yourself, the best thing to do is just to put the money into something like a global index tracker like the MSCI World Index, and you can do it through an exchange traded fund, and it's a very cheap thing to purchase through your broker. I, as an individual, massively believe that the best active fund managers, those that believe they can outperform, for example, their global portfolio of shares they choose, will outperform over the long term the world index. I believe that the best people at managing money will generate far better returns than the world index.
Than a basic index fund.
Than a basic index fund.
Okay.
But you have to do the research.
Because it's hard to find those.
And it's harder work. But the world index as a basic starting point is a very good place to go.
Okay. So what if people have the mentality who are like, oh, I only have an extra maximum $100 a week, so £50 a week left over. Like, oh, that's not that much money. What's the point of investing?
Well, how many weeks are there in a year? You know, that's they're 52, aren't there? So that's a lot of money. And it's amazing once you started that saving habit. It is amazing how much you can learn in that first year you do it, and how much you realise the value of saving, and it's a great discipline. I just nobody ever taught. I was never taught this. If I'd learnt this when I was much younger, I've learnt more in the last 10 years, probably in the last 5 years, than I've learnt throughout my entire career as a fund manager. I now get it.
Wait, why? What happened in the last 5 years compared to the 25 years prior?
Well, there are all sorts of things you think you can do, which then, over the last, since the financial crisis, I've learnt that I can't market time, i.e. time the market. And the old adage of it's not timing the market that counts, it's time in the market that is important.
So just buying and holding.
So buy and hold. That's the key. Buy and hold. So you buy great quality businesses or great quality funds or good quality exchange traded funds.
Is that index funds?
Index
when you say
funds,
that?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And you will be looking after your long term goals really well.
Okay.
It's so simple, isn't it?
Yeah, it almost feels like it's. I think that's why maybe we struggle to do it because it's so like unglamorizing. It's not like buying a house where you get the physical thing. It's just saving
So
and
in the office,
investing.
I'm teaching the people who work in my team. I'm teaching them to sit on their hands. Find the best people. They're all going to go through different periods of performing really well or performing badly, whether the wind is behind them or in their face, according to their investment style, because all managers have different styles.
As in fund managers.
As in fund
Yeah.
managers. And just because their style gets out of fashion over a year or two or three doesn't mean that they're suddenly not a good fund manager. As long as they've stuck to their investment process, then that hasn't changed. So I say you probably only get one opportunity a year in our business of running a fund of funds, where I pick a portfolio of fund managers, to make a real difference to our investors in terms of the returns we can generate. All the other changes we make are just responding to noise, and they are so often actually detrimental to the performance of the funds. So I'm teaching people to do as little as possible unless it's absolutely crystal clear that this is a brilliant idea.
Okay, so you help find funds.
Yes.
Can we talk about finding funds and fund fees? Because some fund fees are insane.
Yes.
What's the highest fund fee you're aware of?
Well, it's a really good question. So when I was a financial advisor all those years ago,
Yeah.
I found that the hardest people to get to invest in the things that they should have been investing in were teachers. Because teachers were always looking at the fees, and they weren't looking at what the potential outcomes were, net of fees, of making those seismic decisions to move out of cash and into a portfolio of equities to protect them against inflation. Fees have come down significantly since those days. In those days, fees could quite easily have been 1.5% per annum.
Okay.
Today, fees would be much nearer, or they would average at 0.75% per annum, I would say, as a ballpark figure.
Okay.
The highest fee that I know of at the moment is about 1% per annum, but that includes all dealing costs. And yet that particular fund manager, since he launched the fund in 2011, I think has generated a return of well over 350% for the investors.
Can we know who
So,
you're talking about?
well, there's no point in me mentioning the name of the fund manager because it's trying to articulate the story behind.
Oh, okay.
It's the outcome that's important.
Yes.
You know, price is what you pay, performance is what you get. Sometimes in life, it's worth paying for.
Okay, so you think even if somebody is charging 1%, but then they, beating the index fund by a good 4 or 5%.
Why not? You know, absolutely. I believe in buying the very best people, and I'm prepared to pay whatever the price that I think is fair for that best person to ensure my clients get the exposure to that excellence. Or obviously, I've retired from being a fund manager myself a couple of years ago, so I now head of research. But when I was a fund manager, that is exactly what I was pressing to do. And the other thing I was always pressing to do was be as brave as possible, and maybe have 20-30% just with one fund manager. There is no need to have any more diversification in a portfolio for you than 30 companies. So you only actually need to own one good quality mutual fund to have all the diversity you need.
One good quality mutual fund as in like an index fund, or are you talking about just
Yes.
one fund?
No, I would have, if you had a good quality global actively managed fund
Oh, that charges, for example,
that
1%.
charged 1%, and they were good quality, and they did a great job, and they generated a return historically that was proven to be north of 7%, compounded per annum, maybe 8, 9, 10%. I mean, every unit holder is a winner. And that's what we're trying to do.
But isn't there a risk of just holding one fund? Because I've heard horror stories of fund people forging numbers, or, it's
Well,
not all legit, or.
the fund manager doesn't have control of the underlying assets. That's why it's within a trust. So you have a custodian who is actually responsible for looking after the assets, and the fund manager is purely, has the privilege of the day-to-day implementation of decisions made within the portfolio. So the fund manager cannot run away with the client's money. Now, I personally, if you look at as Chatters, who is my great friend, who I've worked with since 1995, has always said, um, uh, "Don't do what I say, do as I do," and I personally feel very comfortable owning 5 different separate funds myself, because that makes me feel comfortable. So, and this is what I try to educate my children to do: own a growth style fund manager, own a value style fund manager, own a technology fund manager, because I think that's the winning sector over the next 10 to 15 years. And then you might want to have a global smaller companies fund manager, and you might want to have a global bond fund manager if that's really what you want to have. But there's no need to own more than five managers.
Right. Okay. And if somebody is kind of like, oh my goodness, this is really overwhelming, I want to start investing though, because you've convinced me with that twin story. Do you think, yeah, just dip your toes in with the index funds
I
and
think
start with that?
just get started.
Okay.
Talk to your friends, find where the best app is that you can start investing. In the UK, we've got a variety of different platforms that people can use, from Interactive Investor to Hargreaves Lansdowne, and you will have the same in Australia, I'm sure. And just get interested, and then you will find your own way. Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. That's what I always tell myself. I love that. Have you read the book, The Psychology of Money?
I have.
Oh, I love that book. And he says how wealth is the money that you didn't spend. And I'm always telling myself that, because I'm like, this is the money I'm not spending and I'm investing for future me. And I love that.
So I think that if your listeners learn nothing else from today's conversation, it is start young, be brave, start young, get into that saving habit. You only need to pick a handful of one mutual fund or a handful of funds. Once you've got your head around how to go about it, and then by starting early, let the money do the work, rather than you having to work so hard doing something you don't want to do to make the money because you haven't saved early enough in your life.
Okay. I love that. I wanted to quickly talk to you about, this whole cost of living crisis. I feel like there's a lot of fear mongering happening right now, and a lot of people, especially young people, are like, I'm never going to be able to afford a house. I'm not going to be able to afford to retire. How am I going to afford to live? I went to shops the other day and a packet of chips was $6, which is £3. A packet of crisps, sorry. Anyway, I just thought that was insane.
Insane.
So usually I'm quite oblivious. I don't really notice the increase that much, but now even I'm noticing it. I'm like, so do you think this is just like a period of time where it's going to be like this, or do you think it's going to be always hard for young people? What do you think?
Wow, what a question. So today's global economy is making life tough for all sorts of people, and and there's no doubt about it, that to put everything in perspective, the hardships that families are suffering in Ukraine and Gaza, just as two examples, are put what we're suffering into the shade. And my parents, your grandparents, had the same with the Second World War, and the loss of life and the families that were absolutely destroyed through war. We had the lights on, we have heating, and we have had an incredibly high standard of living for a prolonged time. I think we had a unsustainably high standard of living that was escalated by zero interest rates for nearly however it was 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And so if you think when interest rates got crunched down post the financial crisis in 2009, all sorts of people and businesses have been able to survive as a result of being able to borrow money very, very, very cheaply. And now the inflation genie is out of the bottle, and you're absolutely right. Some of the very basic things in life have got a lot more expensive. But I don't think it is something which we should be overly worried about. We're just going to have to work a bit harder and for longer. I don't think you're going to be retiring before you're 70.
Wow, do you think young people won't retire till they're
No,
70?
I really don't. And even if you were to retire at 65, you've got a good 80,000 hours of working life ahead of you. So, for goodness sake, as you would always say, because all positive messages you do in your podcasts, find something that you enjoy, because you're going to be doing it for a very, very long time. So I don't think we're going to be able to retire. I don't think we can rely upon the state to produce our pensions. I think that state pensions are different from one country to the next. The UK state pension is, to my mind, the nearest thing to a Ponzi scheme, because it's not invested in equities. It's basically reliant upon people who are working today paying for people who stopped working to draw their pensions, and it all works really well until you have an aging population with a declining youthful population who won't be able to support the old and bold who are in rude health but have retired long ago, which is why the pension age is going up and up in the UK, because that's the only way they can continue to keep the Ponzi scheme going. So my attitude has always been just take control of your own life. And that's something which I did from a very early stage. When I was a very young man, a couple of things happened to me at home. I had a very, very lovely home life, and I was given a great education. But a couple of things happened to me which made me think to myself, I want to take control of my life. And that was from the tender age of about 17. And it's so important that your generation take control of their own life and work as hard as they need to work to achieve what they want to achieve. And we must only blame ourselves for what we do and don't achieve, and not blame others for what we do and don't achieve, because actually there's no glass ceiling. We can all be incredibly successful. I remember a great line from Warren Buffett, that fabulous investor, who said,
I know that guy.
a fool with a plan is going to be a lot more successful than a genius without one. So never underestimate what you can achieve. And luck is something which most people have the opportunity of luck coming their way, but you have to identify that luck and then grasp it. And that might mean you have to change direction. And too many people are scared to turn left at the T-junction and change career, or turn right at the T-junction because it's not working. The next job may not be the one that's for you, but the one after might be, and that might be where the career path comes from. So embrace life and the challenges that come with it, and there is luck involved, but my goodness, those people who are immensely successful have grasped it with both hands. It hasn't just fallen into their lap.
They've chosen it and they've been very focused.
Very focused.
Very focused.
Very focused.
But so if I save a lot and invest a lot, surely I can retire before 70.
I'm sure you can.
Okay, great.
I'm sure you can. But the funny thing is that if you enjoy your work, one of my ambitions was to retire.
Yeah.
And then I've got to my age now, and I've suddenly realised that actually the privilege in life, the honour in life, is for having found something you enjoy so much doing, you don't want to retire, because actually this is a lot of fun. And there's nothing more fun than teaching your generation about all the mistakes that Chatters and I have made, I think the next generation of our team are going to be a lot better than we have been, hopefully, because they would have learnt from our mistakes. Hopefully, they would have learnt from our mistakes. So, no, actually, working with young people is really, it's really, really rewarding.
Oh, that's great. No, I think, yeah, when I say retire earlier, I mean have the option to retire, but then maybe not, because I will be loving what I do so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The last question I want to ask, unless you
Yes.
have anything else you want to
No,
sprinkle in there.
let's see what the last question is.
Okay, the last question is, what is your thoughts on the statement, money doesn't buy happiness?
I think it's absolutely true. Money does not buy happiness. Money does provide financial security. It does enable you to do things that give you shared experiences in life, particularly with your family. And there is no greater gift than to give experiences of life that you share with your family. So if you are lucky enough to have been as successful as I've been, then my advice is don't collect too much stuff. Keep life much more simple than I've done, and spend your money in ways which give you great pleasure in sharing those experiences. And it's the same with charity. Give to those charities which give you pleasure, because that will give you an enormous amount of pride in what you have achieved. Of course, the question you originally asked me, I haven't answered, which was, how did I become so wealthy?
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Of course.
I was like, we didn't answer that.
No. And not being a politician, I will answer it.
Okay.
I found two amazing people to work with. And one of them is John Chatford Roberts, who you have interviewed.
I know that guy.
The other guy is a guy called Peter Lorre, who you haven't interviewed.
No.
And the three of us had three very different characteristics. I had seen absolutely at the work face what investors were looking for the married couple who had some savings what they needed to be able to achieve their goals. I'd sat there in the kitchen with a cup of coffee and talked through their financial affairs, and we'd made a plan together, and then we'd acted on my advice or the advice of the company I work for. And so that gave me a passion to do something that I thought was repeatable in a very large scale, but we needed a brand behind us that was going to give us the integrity in the UK marketplace that people would want to be associated with. And when John and Pete and I got together, I realised that I had two very, very talented people to work with. I've never been somebody who has had mastered the attention to detail. My wife will tell you that. I tend to leave jobs half done in the garden because I get suddenly attracted by doing something else. Pete had this incredible intensity of attention to detail, and John had this incredible understanding of the global macro when it came to asset allocation. And I had this understanding of how to communicate with the investor, how we would run their money for them. And then our clients became the financial advisor. So we sold our mutual funds, our unit trusts, to the financial advisors. And the thing that made the difference is every time somebody recommended our unit trust to their client, we wrote a thank you letter that had been signed by one of the three of us to the advisor for that piece of business and enclosed a new application form for the next time. So we knew that the Merlin portfolio application form would be at the top of their briefcase. And so we kept it...
Hang on, was this your company called Merlin? Or
Merlin,
were you working with Jupiter?
Yeah, the Jupiter Merlin range of funds was a seamless range of funds from low risk to high risk, using fund of funds as the tools to generate the returns. And we ended up having very big support from the likes of Nationwide Building Society and HSBC and Skipton Building Society, amongst others. And we totally believed in what we were doing. Our sales team at Jupiter got it. The advisor base got it. And we used to go and see the advisors once every 6 months, all around the country. It didn't matter what the weather was, whether the economy was doing well or bad. The stock markets were on their knees or where they were flying. The best time to see people was when they're on their knees. They need the support then. And we kept it really, really simple. And that enabled a very clear message to be repeated again and again and again. And then we generated the returns that exceeded client expectations. They never exceeded ours. They either met or exceeded client expectations. And if they didn't exceed client expectations, it's a free world, they could take their money elsewhere. And that's what should happen. And that's how we built the business. And Jupiter was the most incredible brand, and still is today. And that's why we still run the portfolios at Jupiter, and we'll never leave. It's a very simple story, and it's been a lot of fun doing it. And now we've got the next generation in their 20s and 30s learning from all our mistakes, and they're doing a brilliant job.
So you kind of built... Did you build a fund? Sorry, I just need to clarify this. So you were hired...
We were hired
by
to build,
Jupiter.
We were hired by Jupiter,
the asset management wealth firm in London,
to build a fund of funds business from zero.
Oh, so you built that fund of funds
business from zero.
Okay.
And we eventually, I don't know what we got now. We got $250,000 investors, and the average investor's probably got £30,000 invested with us, and it's the most important £30,000, in their world, and we cannot afford to screw it up. It sounds really easy, But the real pressure of the job, and this is why, for anyone who's thinking of becoming a fund manager, this is why you have to think about it very hard, because as you can tell, my passion is investing with people for our clients. But you wear it very heavily when markets go down, and it every time markets crash, it's like having it's like having a car crash, and one more marble of courage is taken out of that bag. And so there comes the time, it did for me after 20 odd years of doing it, that I thought there weren't enough marbles left in the bag. Younger people have more courage. And
Really?
I think absolutely. And I think it's really important when you know that you haven't got the energy to interview as many fund managers as I used to, because the more stones you turn over, the more gems you find, and B, your levels of courage can evaporate as you get older, and so it's so important to hand over to the next generation. Now, Pete retired a long time ago, and John has never had that similar experience. His courage and his passion is as high as it ever was, and so our different skill sets are still very, very important within the team. And we think it takes about 10 years to train a young person in the team up to be ready to manage the money alongside us.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not a quick fix. You have to pick the person who you can mold into being the perfect progeny to manage the money. And of course, one of the things I've learned over the years is that people who try to be excellent at something else in life have such a huge advantage, particularly sports men and women. And the reason is that they believe in being coached. They believe that they're not the finished article. And they believe that teamwork is very important. So to have people who believe in teamwork, who believe they aren't the finished article, who therefore have no hubris or arrogance, and who always have wanted to try and improve the process and evolve how we do things, is so important to the integrity of how our business will evolve in the future. And that's why it's going to carry on being a great success.
Wow. Okay. So to summarize this conversation, is there anything else you want to add in?
No, I've said far too much.
No, you've said amazing stuff. Okay, so to summarize, we want to make sure we're passionate about what we're picking, because we're going to be working for a long time.
We are.
But that's okay as long as we're passionate about it. We're going to start putting money aside each week or every time we get paid. Start investing. Just dip your feet in with some basic index funds.
Yeah.
We are going to have an emergency fund before we do that, though, because
Yeah.
we don't want to. I see some of my friends, they'll like invest and then they'll be like, oh, kind of want to travel to Europe, or my car's just broken down, and then they pull their money out of the investments. So I feel that's not a good habit to get into.
Can I give one bit of advice too?
Yes.
Is that regular investment every month? The compounding of returns really kicks in after 10 years. That's when it really kicks in.
Oh, really kicks in after 10 years?
Yeah. So after a year or 2 or 3, it might look like your portfolio might still be down a bit. It could easily be down. 5, 6, 7 years, it could begin to begin a little bit healthier. Once you're doing it for 10 years, you think, well, this was an easy game. So you have to be patient.
Okay.
So patience is crucial.
It seems like patience is a very overarching theme
It's
of this
hard.
conversation.
It's really hard.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? It's so hard. I love to use a compound calculator thing. I think you can just Google.
You can
compound
Google them.
calculator.
They're brilliant.
They're brilliant, but I do notice like the 9 to the 10 years, or there is 1 year where it just suddenly skyrockets.
Yeah.
I can't remember what year it is, but maybe it is the 9 to the 10.
Well, I tell you, once you go from 10 to 20, it's just magical.
Okay, this is exciting. Now I just want to invest even more.
Yeah, so you should. Then you can relax. then you can
Then
enjoy
you can relax.
your job.
Okay, and then I think the last overarching theme would be make sure you're always learning and being able to be kind of mentored and coached. Don't think that you know it all.
And don't be afraid of working much harder than your peers. Yeah. I know it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert at something.
It's a lot of hours.
That's a lot of hours. So, just once you've found your passion, just get into it. And someone with an average amount of intelligence, with that 10,000 hours of passion, my goodness, you can really move the dial.
Okay, I actually do have one extra question. Do you think it's better at our age to take a lower paying job, but one where we're going to learn a lot and it's really going to skyrocket our skills and ability, or a higher paying job that we might be kind of really good at already and there's not that much room for growth?
Okay, so...
And we're not that passionate about.
Okay, so... In which subject was your best tutor at school in your last year?
Oh, as in like which teacher was like?
Yeah. Which subject was it? The one that was outstanding. Or at uni? Was there someone that was outstanding?
Oh, as in the teacher.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, really?
Well, for me,
Yeah.
I hated physics.
Yeah.
I hated physics. I think I got 27% in my GCSE, or in those days called O-level, mock exam.
Yeah.
And I then changed my physics teacher to Mr. Hudson, who was one of the team that helped design the nose of the Concorde. And I ended up getting a B in my O-level physics, which was beyond my wildest dreams.
Aww.
And so what I'm saying here is, go for that low-paying job if you're going to be learning from the best. Always learn from the best people, because if you learn from the best people, you learn very, very quickly. That's absolutely crucial. Don't sacrifice that opportunity of learning from somebody who is outstanding. It will save you years.
Okay. Wow, thank you. I really needed to hear that. I love that. Thanks so much. Well, thank you for coming on and all your words of wisdom. Algy has a podcast, so it's just called Investing with Algy. Am I correct?
Very nearly. It's called Algy's Investment Podcast.
Algy's Investment Podcast. And it's on Spotify and it's really good. Is it on other listening platforms?
It's on Apple.
It's on Apple.
And it's got a website, which is...
Does it?
algysinvestmentpodcast.com.
Ah, I love that.
And yeah, I love doing it. I only do six episodes a year.
I love that.
And so you can binge every September.
Yeah, every September. Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
That's a pleasure.
If you guys did enjoy this podcast, feel free to screenshot it, put it on your stories and tag me. You can come join the party on Instagram at Attitudes with Andy. We're also on TikTok and YouTube. And wherever you are, please feel free to press follow and subscribe, as that really helps. Okay, bye. I'll see you next week.